Yeah, thank you for joining us today. We're going to give it a few minutes to give people the opportunity to join the call. And for those who are already with us, my name is Steve Baker, and I'm the Technical Director of Animex International. I'm also joined here by my colleague Kelly, who will be running the slides for us today, and our presenter Steve Mars, who I'll give a proper introduction to shortly. This webinar has been designed with the USA primarily in mind, but we do have people joining from all across the world, so welcome to those from far and wide. Within this webinar, we will be showing some examples of how projects from across the world have been used for, to help guide and control the movement of mammals. So there will no doubt be things for everybody to take away, no matter where you're from. Obviously, as we're kind of waiting for more people to come in, I can see they're kind of coming in quite thick and fast. And before I hand over to Steve, I just want to take you through a few housekeeping items, really. So if the PowerPoint as it appears in front of you appears too small, you can actually change the screen layout in front of you by clicking the 3 vertical dots, which is next to the red kind of hang up icon on the bottom part of your screen. You can then select to change this layout at the top of the list, and you can either make it full screen or basically minimize Steve, Kelly, and myself's little windows. At the end of the presentation, we'll also host a short Q&A, time dependent. Now, there is a link to a Slido page in the chat. You should have also received this link via an email yesterday. Here, you can kind of submit your questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Any that we're unable to get to during this time we have with you today, we will do our best to send answers in an email along with the recording of this webinar, and we hope to do that by the end of the week. We'll also be sending a copy of some fencing specifications that we'll show later on during this presentation within that email. And also, finally, if you're able to, please do consider donating to the Amphibian and Reptile Conservancy. A link is also shared in the chat. And reptiles and amphibians are at a significant risk to roads, and we want to help support ARC's wonderful work through your kind donations. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Steve Mars. Steve is a retired regulatory specialist with 35 years of experience at the US Fish and Wildlife Service and the Army Corps of Engineers. He brings a wealth of experience in managing complex projects, collaborating across government levels, and passionately advocates for protecting people and wildlife on roads all across America. He's been working with us at Animex for just over a year, and he continues to help promote and educate people about better fencing practices to protect people and wildlife. Now, it's my pleasure to hand over to Steve, who will take you through our presentation that explores specifically how you can adapt standard DOT wildlife fencing to better protect people and wildlife. Steve, are you there and you ready? Kelly, you ready?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Good morning or afternoon for some of you. My name's Steve Mars. I'm a senior sales manager at Animex International. Today, I'll be introducing you to a webinar on adapting standard DOT wildlife fencing practices to better protect people and wildlife. Along with my colleagues Steve Baker and Kelly Clark, we're going to discuss why wildlife fencing for large mammals can be problematic for species such as reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals. We'll explore some of the current research and guidelines on what makes wildlife fencing safe and effective for all species. We're going to discuss several case studies that demonstrate the successes learned by road ecologists, and we'll be presenting some great photos and videos of wildlife interacting with fencing and crossing structures. Finally, we'll share some design tips and construction specifications that you can use on your own projects. This webinar is the first in a series of several presented by Animex, focused on planning and installing wildlife fencing. I just want to say thanks for joining us. We're excited and grateful to see so many people participating in today's webinar. I noticed a special shout out to somebody who just joined us from Norway. So yeah, we're pretty excited about the amount of folks that are joining us and from all places on this planet are joining us. So thanks for joining us. As a reminder, my colleague Steve will be moderating your questions as we go along, and we'll host a Q&A session at the end. As most folks know, on today's webinar, roads can be a big problem for wildlife and their movement across a given landscape. They fragment habitat, create barriers to movement, and cause wildlife vehicle collisions. In the United States, there are 3.9 million miles of roads. And for context, this distance would wrap around the circumference of the Earth 156 times or take you to the moon and back 8 times. Typically, the majority of wildlife fencing the driving public sees is for large mammals such as deer, elk, bear, and moose, as these animals represent more of a threat to human life and property than with smaller animals. Not all roads need wildlife fencing. However, where there are wildlife vehicle collision hotspots, fencing can be a management tool to improve road safety and promote wildlife protection. Wildlife fencing is a proven management tool used by DOTs to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions. Fencing alone can reduce collisions by 50%, and when combined with a habitat connectivity crossing project, wildlife vehicle collisions can be reduced by 90% or more. Over 1 million large animal crashes occur in the United States every year. Just driving in areas of known migrations can be dangerous. Not only can this lead to road mortality for animals, but can also contribute to significant property damage and risk to human life. Wildlife vehicle collisions cause 440 human fatalities a year. The average cost of a deer vehicle crash is just over $9,000, with collisions with elk and moose exceeding $40,000. These figures reflect costs associated with property damage, hospitalizations, injuries, and loss of public resource. And as we go through these slides here, at the bottom of each slide in a font that is incredibly small, but you'll be able to pull these references when we send you the link for this webinar. So just know that we're putting some notable figures and facts out, and in the bottom of each slide is a reference section of where we pulled that material from. So back to the slide. Federal Highways estimates the total cost of wildlife vehicle collisions in the United States at over $8 billion a year. These figures only represent vehicle impacts with large animals. What about the smaller ones, where collisions that are not on the minds of most highway users? The Federal Highway Administration estimates that over 350 million vertebrates are killed on U.S. highways annually. That's nearly 1 million animals per day. The loss of this many animals is unsustainable for the long-term survival of many vulnerable species. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service currently lists 28 federal listed species, many of which are slow-moving, whose continued existence is threatened by roads and wildlife vehicle collisions. This growing knowledge of species decline for reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals is gaining the attention of road ecologists, DOT and state natural resource personnel, academics, and non-government organizations. All across the United States, we've seen the driving public respond on their own to save wildlife. In particular, many drivers and their passengers stop to help turtles and put themselves in harm's way. They've been hurt or killed despite their well-intentioned efforts. Now, I'm talking about the folks that are getting out of their cars. Our next slide actually depicts this very behavior occurring. Last year, a Florida driver stopped his pickup truck and exited his vehicle on a busy 4-lane highway to save a large snapping turtle. What ensued was a multi-vehicle crash that resulted in several life-threatening injuries. Footage of this was captured by a dash cam from a tractor trailer who was involved in the accident. If you look closely, you can see that an occupant of the stopped pickup truck exited their vehicle to help the turtle, not knowing a tractor trailer was bearing down on him and other stopping vehicles. Luckily, nobody was hurt in this incident, and the turtle survived. This could have been a lot worse. And, you know, as we're watching the second time, all you have to do is just Google road fatalities and type in any animal, and just about you're going to find something where, you know, folks on roads have been seriously hurt or killed because of others stopping or trying to swerve away from an animal on the road. So next slide. No one wildlife fence works for all animals. Large mammal fencing, such as woven wire, chain link, and livestock type fencing, are not suitable for reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals. Small animals such as frogs and turtles can easily slip through or climb over these types of fencing. In addition, mesh fencing poses risks for entanglement, which is a particular problem for snakes, as they become entangled in the mesh or hardware galvanized cloth and wind up becoming trapped. Many reptiles and amphibians can move across the landscape and can climb many types of fencing. In addition, snakes and lizards are often attracted to roads. Asphalt road surfaces absorb and retain more heat than surrounding habitats, making them attractive places for cold-blooded animals to bask. Even animal gender can be linked to a disproportionate number of animals killed. Female turtles are killed every spring in search of nesting habitat. As some on the call know, the coastal diamondback terrapin is extremely vulnerable to large spring mortality events on roads leading to popular Barrier Island destinations. Male turtles are also susceptible to be running over during dispersal events. Turtles are slow moving. It may take upwards of 10 minutes to cross a 30-foot, two-lane road. Snakes can take longer, as their bodies cannot gain sufficient purchase on the asphalt to move quickly. And with amphibians and their complex life cycle requirements, gaining access to habitat can be prohibitive if a road bisects access to a breeding pond or forested habitat. And to complicate matters, amphibian crossings are slow and occur mostly at night during inclement weather, making it all but impossible for drivers to know of the animal's presence. There are numerous publications and emerging guidelines outlining the most effective ways to fence for small animals. One of these guidelines is the I&E Wildlife and Traffic Handbook, which states that while wire mesh is a standard fence material for large mammals, it is not suitable for amphibians and reptiles, as they can easily climb over or through mesh fencing and can become entangled in the mesh. The I&E manual recommends to provide fencing which is effective and safe for amphibians, reptiles, and other small fauna. Smooth, opaque, and durable materials should be used, such as metal, concrete, or heavy-duty polyethylene. Recently, California Transportation, or Caltrans, published guidance that included very similar recommendations regarding the use of opaque fencing materials for reptiles and amphibians. Caltrans concluded that frogs, turtles, and snakes are not only able to climb mesh fencing, but can also spend significantly more time interacting with mesh fencing rather than opaque fencing. The question is asked why, and the animals can see through it, and they're wasting valuable energy time trying to get through it. The opaque fencing keeps them from expending energies and moves them along towards wildlife crossing structures. Caltrans rightly states that mesh fencing is not suitable without the addition of a visual barrier for small animals. These guidelines tell us that solid barrier fencing are best for reptiles and amphibians. But does the same opaque fencing work at reducing wildlife collisions for mammals? Anecdotal evidence and emergent science says yes. Within the ag industry, solid barriers are commonly used to effectively move animals between fields or to keep them out of cultivated areas. In a recent white-tailed deer study, researchers suggest that solid barriers are beneficial for keeping mammals off roads. We're now going to introduce you to some case studies we've been involved with that further demonstrates the effectiveness of solid fencing and its ability to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions for reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals. Our first case study comes from Brazil. Having noted the increased road mortality of the Brazilian tree frog and other amphibians, researchers installed a freestanding Animex solid fence made from heavy-duty polyethylene to reduce road mortality and guide animals toward culverts and other roadway underpasses. The result was a significant increase in the use of the crossings and a reduction of collisions for all species groups after the installation of the fencing. Although researchers believe some of these animals could climb over or dig under the fence, they concluded that solid material provided a visual and sensory barrier that resulted in animals walking the fence line until they reached the crossing structure. You can see several species of animals using a round culvert pipe after being directed by the heavy-duty polyethylene fencing to the crossings. We also work closely with the Royal Botanical Gardens, Victoria in Australia, to reduce the road mortality of the endangered bandicoot. The same fencing materials used in the Brazil case study was used along the road to direct wildlife towards culvert crossings. The project continues to be successful at keeping a diverse range of animals off the road and safely guiding them to a wildlife crossing structure. For the Australia project, we also installed one-way plexiglass gates for animals to use that were on the wrong side of the fence. For animals on the right side, we noted several of them interacting with the one-way gates, but those animals quickly moved on, minimizing the expenditure of energy or pacing often associated with mesh fencing. In these still pics, a wombat, a tawny frogmouth, and a echidna were captured interacting with the plexiglass gate. We also have some great videos of this behavior that I'd like to show you. Here you can see how the echidna and shortly a koala walking along the solid barrier, and when they reach the one-way plexiglass, the animal adjusts its behavior briefly, then moves on along the polyethylene fencing. And our last case study comes from New York. Our polyethylene fencing was installed to protect a state-listed snake with the goal of guiding snakes along the fencing to a box culvert crossing to connect a known hibernacula to additional forested habitat. Cameras were installed at the culverts to monitor their use and quickly captured other wildlife using the same crossing. A mother raccoon and her 5 young were captured using the crossing almost daily, and a bobcat that's very capable of jumping the 24-inch fence instead preferred using the box culvert rather than crossing the road at grade. We've put together some of the best trail camera footage from these case studies for you, which I'll play now. These last couple slides are coming from the New York project. What most rhodocologists find, as you're looking through at these slides here at this video, is that the animals do become really accustomed to these passages, and will during the day or night use them at great frequency. So now we're going to go into some designs and specifications for wildlife fencing. In the past, many different types of fencing was used to guide small animals, including mesh, silt fencing, and even orange safety netting. These early fencing attempts did not take into account an animal's life history or their biological behavior. As discussed in the INE and the Caltrans guidance documents, the use of these earlier materials was unsuitable for wildlife protection purposes. These images also show that the early materials were short-lived, had little UV protection, quickly degraded, and required frequent maintenance. In comparison, solid barrier fencing, such as the UV HDPE and preformed metal, are more effective. They're resilient for many years and require significantly less maintenance and replacement. This is a specification of a large mammal fencing commonly used across the U.S. We borrowed this drawing from a couple Colorado DOT contract specifications. Specifically, this specification is for deer and elk fencing, and it consists of a high 8-foot high woven galvanized fabric attached to wooden posts. The gaps in the wire can range anywhere from between 2 and 8 inches vertically and up to 6 inches horizontally. This type of fencing is proven to be effective in preventing large mammals from getting on the road, but as discussed earlier, smaller animals can easily slip through these gaps and burrow underneath. The good news is that the deer elk fencing can easily be modified for smaller animals by placing a solid barrier along the bottom section that extends 8 inches below to prevent burrowing and 22 inches above to act as a visual and sensory screen. Should there be hydraulic considerations required for a specific location, perforations can be added to the bottom of the fencing material to aid in water flow and prevent scouring or washout. The additional solid barrier would add as little as $3 per foot to an existing elk fencing. As a reference, in 2017, from one of those Colorado documents, Colorado DOT was estimating that an 8-foot high elk fence would cost approximately $13 per linear foot. Practitioners of rhodocology should consider the use of anti-climb and anti-dig features when considering the design of small animal fencing for climbing species such as the tree frog or rat snake. Research has shown that modifying the top of the fence with a lip prevents animals from climbing over the top. Both L-shaped and U-shaped lips have proven effective to deter climbing. In a similar way, a lip buried underground at the bottom of the fence deters many animals from burrowing under the fence, such as tortoises and groundhogs. The next couple of slides will be examples of installing the polyethylene fence to other types of fences commonly seen on roadways. This is an example of installing the polyethylene fence on a livestock fence. Some cable-stayed guardrails on roadways could also use the same type of fencing installation. This is an example of a chain link being modified to accommodate the heavy-duty polyethylene fencing. And lastly, a timber and steel guardrail example. Now, again, at the end of this show, at the end of this webinar, we can provide you guys with all of these specifications in further links. So to recap, we explored why large mammal fencing is not suitable for reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals. We introduced you to some case studies of Animex fencing being used and some published research and technical guidelines that recommend the use of opaque fencing such as HDPE. We discussed the pros and cons of fencing materials and the benefits of polyethylene fencing after considering the biological capabilities of animals such as frogs, tortoises, and snakes. Finally, we examined how to retrofit a large mammal fence to keep smaller animals from getting through those large mammal fences and entering a roadway. The key message we hope that you take home is that although many wildlife mitigation projects are focused on large mammals such as elk, deer, many smaller animals are being killed at significantly higher rates that needs everyone's attention. We're hoping this webinar will help the road ecology community in reducing wildlife vehicle collisions for small animals and begin connecting more habitat that is currently fragmented by our nation's roadway systems. Thanks again for participating in today's webinar. We hope the information we provided was informative and will help you in your next roadside ecology project. In the days to come, please check your emails. We'll be sending you a copy of our improved DOT wildlife fencing guide, along with dates for up and coming webinars and subjects that will include layouts, costs of fencing, installation, maintenance, and monitoring. The practitioner guide QR code can also be scanned using your mobile device while we have the slide up, and be uploaded while we take questions from the audience. Please feel free to reach out to us at any time. If you'd like more information or advice on projects you're working on, we'd be more than happy to help you plan your next road ecology project. A copy of this webinar will be available online in the next week. For those watching live, I'm going to turn the Q&A session over to my colleague, Steve Vega. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Loads of great questions coming in while you're presenting there. And unfortunately, I don't think I've got enough time to address these in the amount of detail that they kind of deserve. Some of the kind of standout questions that are being raised are about kind of durability, particularly of the HDPE product that we focused on during this webinar. Just on that, the HDPE product that we kind of showcased here for these applications are the kind of most low cost way to adapt standard barriers, has a lifespan of 15 plus 20, 25 years. So durability in that sense is not necessarily a problem, especially when other traditional mesh, even the wire that you would use, typically I don't even necessarily comes with any guarantees or as an expected lifespan of, so about 20 years. There's also lots of questions about drainage. So Steve presented there is a kind of perforation that can be applied to this material, which as a standard from our perspective is graded to match commonly used silt fencing flow rates that can be increased and decreased depending on anticipated water flows, but that's not the only method to be able to deal with water and hydrology issues on site. So again, it needs a bit more of an expansion and explanation on that, and also that can be very project specific. So if you are somebody who has a particular concern about that, please reach out to us directly and we're more than happy to kind of speak on that specific to your project. Yeah, and just to again reiterate and thank everybody for joining us today. We had over 120 people at one stage, which is fantastic. We will be sharing this webinar, the recording of this. Somebody also requested the slides, so we can also give you the slides. We can also, if you feel there's a somebody or another group that may benefit from hearing this type of information, and even have elements of it tailored to a particular project or area you're in, we'll be more than happy to kind of give a closed presentation on your behalf. And yeah, the specifications will come with that. I have posted a link to that in the chat, but I think that's it. unless Steve, you got anything else to add, any closing remarks? But yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, Steve, did anybody give us a question on snow loading?
Yeah, there are a few questions on snow on this. So again, it's similar to the other questions where, and short answer, as a standalone barrier, the HDPE is extremely durable. There's a specific ways it should be installed. If it's going to be a freestanding barrier and snow loading is an issue, if it's being attached to an existing larger fence like we have demonstrated here, then kind of snow impact is not a problem, because you have, you know, there's two structures working together to kind of take and manage that impact. But again, we've got plenty of examples of how we can share and show how that's been used in different parts of North America. Yeah, I think that's. Is there anything else, Steve, on your side of things?
No, that's the only one I wanted to add. You know, we are doing a project with Caltrans up in the Sierras, and so it really does speak of the longevity of the polyethylene product being able to withstand snow loading and temperatures.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. We're in constant discussions with various projects by Caltrans, but other DOTs, and that's part of this kind of webinar, to kind of get, you know, a lot of people in the same place to kind of engage in this conversation. We've seen a lot of projects all across the world, as we've shown here, and can see the kind of, understand the kind of problems that people face and some of the challenges, and then trying to kind of find the most effective, functionally and financially, to kind of mitigate and help to effectively, reduce wildlife vehicle collisions and then improve the connectivity for wildlife wherever that may be. So yeah, on that note, I will leave it there. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll hope to speak to and see you soon.